Noswaith dda. Good evening. Croeso I Plaid Cymru yn fyw. Welcome everybody to Plaid Cymru Live. You can please follow us on social media. Hashtag Plaid Cymru yn fyw, Plaid Cymru Live. And I'm delighted to welcome with me this evening Nikita Jones, an activist, a counsellor and a specialist mentor. I'm sure many of you will already know her from Yes Cymru. And also Fflur Jones, a member of the Independence Commission and a partner-in-law with the firm Darwin Gray. Nawr, does gen ddim cyfieithu, da ni'n mynd I weithio rhwng y ddwy iaith gorau fedrwn ni. Felly mae croeso chi ofyn cwestiynau trwy'r chat yn y Gymraeg, a nawn ni ffeindio'n ffordd I ateb gorau fedrwn ni. So we're going to be finding our way in the great 21st century Wales that we know so well and love. Bilingually, as best we can. I'm sure we'll manage to make, say fantastic things and interesting things and probably manage to say things wrong in both languages. But of course, we're talking about independence and how we bring people with us. And I think this is a really, an ideal panel to do that. And the first, my very first question, mae'n yn berthnasol I ni gyd fod yn meddwl amdano fo. Of course, sut dyn ni yn eistedd adre yn swyddfeydd yn hunan, sut dyn ni'n ymdopi yn yr amseroedd cyffroes anodd sydd ohoni. Just to ask, and I'll kick off with Fflur, how are you coping in these difficult times now?
Diolch, Liz, thank you. Well, it's been challenging, like it has been for everyone. Obviously, some people have had worse times than others, and those of us who remain healthy have a lot to be thankful for, don't we? Personally, as a partner in a law firm, there's been an incredible amount of work to do. I'm an employment lawyer by trade, so there's obviously been a lot of sad work to do with people losing their jobs left, right and centre, and also seeing an increase in discrimination claims also on the rise as a result of the pandemic. So it's been quite heavy work and quite stressful, but doing the best we can to assist people. But the challenges of working from home have always also been interesting. Now I do a mixture back and forth just because of the sheer volume of the work, basically, means that I have to go in the office now and again. But it's a lot to be thankful for, but I'm looking forward to it being over, shall we say.
Oh, we all are. And Nikki, how are things in Penrhyn Deudraeth?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've got two very young kids, so they keep me busy, but equally, as Fflur has mentioned, with everything kind of going on in my counselling work, I've seen quite a bit of a rise in stress levels with clients, with losing jobs, with general anxiety, with everything that's going on, and fear as well. So it's been a bit challenging, and I suppose working from home, it brings its own challenges. There's not much boundaries. You go from being a professional to a mum within a matter of seconds. So it's
within a matter of seconds, and whether they come through the door. I have it whether the dogs come through the door and when they try and get out again. Problem here.
Right. One of them is going to walk through the door, so I apologise if that happens.
It'll add to the fun. Right, okay, let's move on now. Peth cyntaf dwi eisiau ni drafod ynghyd destun ag annibyniaeth ydy'r, y cysyniad na o'r gwir in erbyn y byd. When it comes to independence, we know that there are what we know to be truths, what we know to be interpretations, and also the fact that we have to address many myths in relation to Wales's place in the world and what we can make of independence and what independence can make of us. I'd like to start off with a question. I think that how do you feel that as a country, do we struggle with self-confidence here in Wales? And is this something that we need to consider as perhaps something that holds people back from being able to support Welsh independence? Nikki, I'd like to start with you. What do you think of this?
I mean, one of the things with me as well is because I'm originally from India, I've only moved here in September 2012. When I look at things, I look at it from kind of like an outsider perspective.
Ooh, I think we may have
things that's come up quite.
We just lost you briefly then.
It's fine. And one of the things that's come across is that level of self-confidence, because when I talk to anyone about independence, usually people are like, yes, we should, but I do come across people who are actually quite worried and scared of independence. And to me, that feels strange, because I come from a country where independence is normal. And so when I hear that, it feels like, but why not? What's wrong with being independent? And I think, yes, confidence is something, and more I'm kind of seeing things as well. It does feel that it's quite difficult, isn't it, when someone's for centuries been telling you you're stupid, you're worthless, you're too small, you're never gonna. And in my work as a counsellor, notice these things, but usually I would hear them in kind of an abusive relationship perspective. And it's weird, because that should not be how relationships should work in countries that are meant to be in harmony. But and I think it's difficult, because when someone keeps telling you this over and over again, you actually start believing it. And that's generally the narrative of abusive relationships anyway, because it's only going to work when the person being abused actually believes that I'm worthless, I am going to be nothing without my abuser. So I can empathize with why people are struggling with the idea, because you've not known any difference. So how are you supposed to imagine what it might feel like?
Yeah, and I think we're being told all the time in Wales that we should be comparing ourselves with this one set model that we get from the UK. And of course, one of the arguments that we obviously need to address and engage with when we're talking about independence is the economic argument. But we're always being told to compare ourselves with what's happening in the southeast, if you like, the southeast of England. The whole of the UK is set up to compare itself within its nations and its regions with what's happening in the southeast of England. And of course, it is the southeast of England that is the only region that isn't within a fiscal deficit. I think it's quite interesting now, just trying to turn Fflur to you. But I think the one thing that I would like to say, I think, before I turn to you and your experiences with the Independence Commission, is that the simple truism that every country that left the British Empire, part of the process of leaving the British Empire, that country was told in no uncertain terms that you will not survive, you will come crawling back with a begging bowl to us, and not a single one has. It's part of the story that's been sold to us, and we need perhaps to look beyond who we're supposed to be comparing ourselves with all the time. But Fflur, I know that this was also discussed in great detail in the Commission. If you could tell us a bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for those of you tuning in who may have read the Commission report, you'll already be familiar with some of the things I'm about to say. But for those of you who've not yet possibly gone past the executive summary, there's lots and lots of good examples put in the report about why we really must challenge this view of ourselves as being too small, too weak, and too dependent. And it's absolutely tied in with the self-confidence argument. But practically speaking, there are lots of things in there that demonstrate and illustrate very well how we've been just basically led down the road at all times to believe that the reason we're like that is because we are too poor. But actually, it's because our economy is built on a system that suits the needs of Westminster and London, effectively, and the South East, isn't it? there's lots of good ideas in there about looking at countries that we, as you say, Liz, we should be comparing ourselves with, rather than possibly some of the countries that are cited to us time and time again as examples of countries where independence, for example, has possibly not been as successful as it could be. So there's a lot of talk about looking to Ireland, of course, which is an incredible example of how an economy has been turned around since it gained independence and gained membership of the European Union. There's a lot of talk in there about how we should be looking to develop agencies that can grow business here, and also how we can basically improve our exports, because that's obviously something that isn't done to the extent it should be at the moment. But also we should be looking very much at what we want to attract, in terms of inward investment here, and looking at the best type of economies to come here, including those in technology and health, tech health, and so forth. So there's lots of ideas in the report, and I know that other people will have other ideas as well, where we can build basically on what we've already got here. And there's other ideas as well about introducing quite interesting different types of taxes, such as road taxes, to reflect the amount of freight that passes through our ports, etc., which is not captured at all at the moment. And also, very crucially, there's a lot of focus on trying to increase and improve the way we use our alumni, both from our Welsh universities, but those also who have gone and studied elsewhere, because lots of those people will be working in business and will have great ideas and will want to be making a contribution. And collectively, there's, if you bring those ideas and strands together, there's no reason why we can't start thinking about having a fighting economy quite quickly.
And I think these messages are so important, because it's one thing in our politics in Wales, and something that I picked up on as a county councillor before I became a member of Parliament, to be putting ourselves constantly in opposition and, if you like, complaining about somebody else making the decisions on our behalf, but not embracing the opportunity to make the decisions. What this does for us, it actually allows us to build our own nation. It's one thing to complain that things aren't good enough, that inequality is rife, even to look back over the last century and see how this is structurally been exacerbated, made worse throughout the United Kingdom, in the, if you like, what is perceived as the extremities of the United Kingdom. It's one thing to be a journalist and to record this inequality. It's another thing altogether to do something about it. So what we are seeking with this, step by step, is how do we make Wales a better place? Because one thing we can say for sure is the place we're in now is not good enough. And those who are telling us that we're not able or sufficient to do it, to make it any better, are the ones who've made an awful lot of difference in making things as bad as possible for us now.
Yes.
But the great opportunity for independence is not just the abstract concept, but to make people's lives better. And how else are we going to do it without independence, without the building blocks towards independence as well?
And I think it's interesting, sorry, Liz, just one last point on that, is how the pandemic has actually served to grow our national self-confidence in quite a striking way. It's been, for the first time ever in all my life, as far as I can remember, as the Wales has been hitting the headlines across the UK as regularly as it has been, for good reasons, because there's been decisive measures taken here that have not been seen elsewhere, etc. And also there's been the stark contrast then with what's been happening in the UK government about it, and how then we start to think then about, actually we can do things better here in Wales, and we can then grow our self-confidence and start to think, as you say, to stop complaining about what other people are doing to us, but think proactively about what we can do to improve our own lot.
Yeah. No, that's really inspiring. Thank you very much. Right, I think we could be talking about the truths and the myths for indefinitely, but I do want to move on, and I think one of the next subject I'd like to raise is that sense of, with a movement towards independence, of course it won't belong to one particular party. It won't succeed if it is just the possession of one particular party. There's a really powerful quote by Robin McAlpine of the Commonweal think tank in Scotland. An independent Wales cannot and must not belong to one government and one political movement or one political party. It is the common inheritance for all. And I think that's, in reaching out now, I'm very aware that it's Plaid Cymru who's doing this now, but we need to reach out beyond the normal, the conventional groups who we talk to. There's always a risk, of course, we're just talking to ourselves. We need to reach out and to plant the idea in people's heads. And that's, I think, it's the exciting thing that's happened, certainly since 2014 with Scotland for people in Wales, but really in the last year. I think the COVID-19 crisis has shown us where the border lies. We knew it was there, but it existed as an abstract idea. Now it exists as a concrete idea. It's part of our the reality of our lives. What I'd like to, Nikki, this question now is to do with how our identities affect how we approach questions of nationality and independence. I'd like to ask you, how would you describe your identity?
So people that don't know me very well, I moved from India to Wales in 2012 September, and I've only recently, just about a year ago, received my, as much as I don't like saying it, British kind of citizenship. I was not very subtle with my Welsh identity there. When I went to do it, I had like my Welsh flag bunting and everything wrapped around my red dress, and kind of did my the Pledge of Allegiance and all of that in Cymraeg. And so I think for me, my husband is Welsh. My kids are Indo-Welsh, as am I. Legally, I don't know if many people would know about this, but legally, as an Indian citizen before, I can't hold two citizenships, so I've got to give up one. So to be able to take up the British one, I had to give up the Indian one. And to be completely honest, for me, I just believe that all I've given up is a paper. That's, no one can take my right, my own national identity from me of being an Indian. But equally, it doesn't mean that that's where it stops. I am growing, my identity is growing, and for me, I am Indo-Welsh because I feel as Welsh as any of you all do. It's very much a part of me. For me, it's where I had my first home. It's where I met the love of my life. It's where I've had my kids. So, no one can take that away just because I've got to, give a legal document up. And I think identity is one of those things. It's yours. No one can police your identity. If even in independent Wales, if you feel that, listen, I'm Welsh, but I'm also British, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter, because what matters is what you feel. And that's the end of it. So I think what my worry has been for quite a while is the lack of kind of teaching a balanced version of history in Wales and generally in all of UK anyway. And one of the things that we noticed quite a lot, when India was under the British rule, was it wasn't that all of Britain was living in India. They turned Indians against Indians, and it was Indians ruling them. So it was really interesting, because right now, that's exactly what's happening. It's not that all of the Westminsters come here and telling us what to do, but we've got people within us who they're turning against us, and we're just fighting with each other. Whereas actually, what we need to do is just work together. It doesn't matter who's the political party. At the end of the day, we are all a part of this country. We're all Welsh here, irrespective of kind of where we are or anything like that in Wales. And that's where it stops. I know, as Liz said, that we're doing this as part of Plaid Cymru, but at the end of the day, we are doing it as part of Cymru, and that is what we need to remember when we are thinking about our identity and who we want to be with independence as well.
Yeah, I mean, this really interests me because obviously, I'm from Southeast London. I learnt Welsh when I was 18, and this sense of multiple identities for the individual and the fact that you have multiple identities as being an enriching experience. You gain, you never lose, nothing ever falls off the edge. You gain as you gain the languages, the communities that you work with. Fflur, how do you think about identity in relation to who in Wales can be included in the national movement?
Well, every single person who lives in Wales should be included in the national movement. I mean, it is of no consequence who you are or where you've started your journey, what cultures and identities you have gained along the way. If you've chosen Wales as your home, either temporarily or permanently, then your voice should be heard. And I think that has to be the absolute basis on which engagement with this idea of independence has to start, because otherwise, if we are exclusive, then we've already lost the war.
Yeah, because again, of course, I'm sure I speak for the three of us on the panel, but when we're one of the ideas, one of the emotional ideas that we seek independence is that we seek to make a better society, and we seek the tools to do that. And I think this is one of these messages when we're talking about civic engagement. It really matters to me personally. This isn't pedigree or any of these, really dangerous, ugly ideas of who belongs and who doesn't.
Yeah. I mean,
society needs to find a way of bringing everybody in too. Yeah, sorry, Fflur.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, lots of people, I've had that all my life. It's like, oh, you come from a village, a Llanuwchllyn, a village in North Wales, and you speak Welsh, and therefore, you are the quintessential Welsh person, and you therefore think you're a better Welsh person than everyone else. It's like, not at all. I mean, it's just a ridiculous concept, isn't it? And the sooner we move away from these kinds of issues being perceived as issues that preoccupy Welsh speakers or North Walians or whatever most, the better, because, this has to be a national debate that involves every single community within Wales, and no one is better than the other.
And those are the values that we're seeking to espouse and to be able to bring about. Yeah. But Nikki is back again. This is the wonders of Wi-Fi. It makes us much more confident technologically because we all survive somehow or other. No, really interesting points. I think, this idea that we are seeking to bring everybody in, that it isn't it's not your background. It is what you want, how you want to be involved with your community. And also, one of the things that we actually see, Nikki, you were talking about things that are used to divide us. We are told to be divided along those lines of, say, North Wales and South Wales. But again, one of the things that we need as a nation to do is to work. We need to acknowledge our strengths and our weaknesses as a nation, but at the same time, Wales is a whole. Otherwise, we're just being regionalised and reduced in our power. And that's, I think, it's a really powerful thing. We need to keep on pushing on that, because again, these ways of dividing us can be very negative in what they achieve.
Liz, can I just add one thing? I thought this might be actually quite important here, because I was reading up on something, and honestly, I actually wasn't aware of it. But I don't know, some of you might know that the Indian independence is on the 15th of August, 1947, which is when we officially were a free country. But I found out yesterday that the Indian National Congress, they stated 26th of January in 1930, 17 years before we actually got the independence, as Independence Day, because even though we weren't technically independent, they basically kind of reinstated the idea that if we actually start believing for us to be our right to be an independent country, that we will become an independent country, we will find the motivation. And actually that motivated people quite a lot. And they didn't actually do political speeches or anything. People would just come on that particular day and just do fun things and things that made them feel patriotic about their own country, kept them in touch with the culture. And interestingly, when we finally did get the independence, and gosh, I'm forgetting his name now, but I can't remember who was the viceroy at the time. Oh my God, it's annoying. I've forgotten the name. But basically, when we weren't supposed to get independence till 48, but they brought it further in because the guy actually believed that if we do it now, the seed of divide and rule that they'd kind of sowed between the Muslims and the Indians, the Pakistanis and the Indians, that would cause an internal collapse in the government. That was the motivation to bring it forward. The exact opposite happened anyway. Nobody who's been given independence has come back. But it was really interesting that the motivation of how it's actually worked out. And I just thought it was kind of relevant here as well.
And of course, to seek out the symbols and the activities and the ceremonies, if you like, by which we acknowledge our being one community as a whole. And I think we're beginning to get this. It's interesting to compare Wales to Scotland because we haven't got the structures that Scotland has. But these sorts of activities, I mean, Fflur, I imagine, because working in law, you're very much aware of how Wales not having a separate legal jurisdiction, which isn't normally what people complain about on the doorstep to me. But this has very, very real effects, doesn't it, in what we can do. I think it even comes down to come back to the economic argument. We don't actually know with ease how much, because the data is collected on a England and Wales with hyphens in the middle basis. That's one of the ways that we can't actually see a clear line and understand what's happening in Wales. And if we did, then you might see that, say, some of the tax take is being collected from companies which have branches here in Wales, but their head offices are in England. So all the tax take or all the corporation tax or whatever is being recorded there, and none of all the actual activity in Wales. I know there's been really interesting work as well on actually trying to detract the information about prisons in Wales. And you actually then find, once you get some of this, Rob Jones of Cardiff University has done some fantastic work on this, and the differences between the experiences of prisoners and families of prisoners in Wales compared to England is quite extraordinary. It's really extreme differences, but you have to get this information, and that's one of our jobs as well, of course, is to do that. Right, I'd like to move on into, I think obviously one of the things that we're doing with this this Plaid Cymru Live event today is trying to reach out to communicate with as many people as possible. Two things at hand. Obviously, we've got the COVID crisis. We can't physically go from door to door. We can't physically hold rallies, unfortunately, but that's how things are as it stands. But also that we do have this, and we're much more familiar with this new technology now as a way of reaching out to people. And I think we are reaching probably far more people than we would have done under conventional means, which probably would have kept us happy then. But we're learning new methods. Fflur, I know that with the Commission that you were particularly looking at the importance of communication. And I wonder, could you tell us something about your conclusions from that?
Yes, absolutely. We were very concerned that the report doesn't gather dust on some people's shelves, and that's the end of it, if you like, because obviously it needs to be a live document that is debated and discussed, and its recommendations taken on into the future. So we, a subgroup of us, spent quite a long time looking at communication and engagement, and we also had some input from Sir Robin McAlpine, who you quoted earlier. So obviously the two strands is communication and how do we go about that. And obviously one thing that must be done is about segmentation of the audience. So we work out who is already pro-independent and in a way is comfortable with that idea. Who are those who are indie curious, and how do you bring those people along this interesting journey? And they are obviously a very significant group of people involving people of all political persuasion who are interested enough to have the conversation, but who are not yet persuaded of the argument, and particularly possibly lacking the self-confidence and also buying still into the idea that we are too poor and too weak and too small. So that's a very important debate and communication that needs to happen. There's also obviously people who are dead against it, but that's not to say that we shouldn't be continuing to communicate with those people, because it's important that they also feel their voices can be heard, because otherwise we are not being inclusive and being respectful of other people's ideas. In terms of engagement, we have luckily in Wales, a vast array of third sector organisations and so forth who would be able to help along with some of the engagements necessary. And also in the report, there's a very clear recommendation that a national commission is set up, which basically would be a sort of non-political body, which would be tasked basically with the role of communicating and informing and educating people about independence in a sort of non-partisan way. So obviously that's very important. And then feeding into that, you'd have then citizens assemblies and so forth as well, who would form an incredibly important role at grassroots level to make sure people are engaged with. So there's lots and lots of work to be done. As you say, the beauty of now is that we can reach audiences from people's comfort of their living rooms, but this is not going to last forever, and we also need to be geared up for when people will come together, and everyone I'm sure will welcome that. So there's a lot of work to be done in the meantime. So that in a nutshell is some of the recommendations of the report.
Yeah, and I think the idea of a national commission, and that obviously takes it out of being protects it from the accusation of being particularly party political. I think that's a really important thing. But yes, also citizens' assemblies. I think in an age where politics is seen as being a bit of a sort of a luxury pursuit for some, but really almost a form of it's not part of people's real lives. And one of our jobs really is to bring. Politics is the difficult of our art of how we actually live together. There's many definitions, but that's one of my favourite ones. I mean, thinking about citizens' assemblies, are there particular messages about how they should be arranged and how we don't just hear the usual suspects, which is a bit of a risk, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, the word inclusivity has to be the first and foremost word that comes into any discussion about how citizens' assemblies should be assembled. And I would imagine that, yes, Cymru also would have a part to play in this discussion, because they've already obviously done a lot of work at grassroots level and have built an incredibly momentous movement on this issue. But I think I don't have the answer as to how they should be formed. I think that's got to be the work of the National Commission, who would basically be doing it from an apolitical view, and would be able to hopefully tap into the organisations that represent all the communities of Wales, because if we don't, we're going to fall flat on our faces. But I think it's very important that once those assemblies are put up and are established, that lots of interesting questions are posed to them, a little bit like you were saying, Liz, about how do we make sure politics reflect the fact that we all have to live together. There are things about how could an independent Wales provide better and sustainable health care systems and so forth. What does it mean in terms of what success stories do we have here? Make it into a positive debate rather than something that is looking at the negatives the whole time.
Yeah, and I think, this is one of the reasons, I must admit, why I'm in Plaid Cymru is this sense that, although obviously Plaid Cymru, as every responsible party, will actually work with other parties and with other people, but you look back since 1979, 1999, it's Plaid Cymru that has imagined the next stage and then worked with others to realise it, to bring it about. And I think this is one of our critical roles now, but we mustn't then get caught up in the trap of party politics of, it's my idea and you can't have it, or we won't talk to you because you've done something else which we disapproved of in the past. We have a cause here which we need to work with other people. But I know, I mean, because I'm sure we're all of us active on social media, and I mean, Nikki, you're really effective on social media, you know, strikingly so. What do you, in your experience, what do you feel works well in reaching out to new audiences, and what are the pitfalls?
I think it's kind of, for me, every time I kind of look at this sort of a narrative, for me, the question comes to be to challenge then those myths that if people are actually having those belief systems about themselves, that no, we can't afford it, no, we can't survive as an independent country, or any of that, is to kind of then, not like, you know, menacing, malicious challenge, but kind of really listen to people, even the ones that disagree with independence, really listen to what's going on, because a lot of the times what's going on is a lot of the misinformation is traveling around as well, especially in this day and age when, you know, anyone can become like a keyboard warrior, and you know, things, there's actual data that supports that misinformation actually is far more likely to reach more people than actual truth. So for me, I always kind of, in a very gentle way, just question that if you actually do have concerns, please share your concerns. And I would like to hear your concerns, because chances are maybe there is something that we can do about that, and actually maybe give you the right figures or something where you're concerned. Because I'm noticing in the comments as well that people are asking about kind of fund, how are we going to fund it, and HS2 and stuff. But the thing is, at the end of the day, there are loads of things that at the moment Wales are actually paying for, which if we didn't, and we actually invested that money into our own country. Now, one of the things is that a country's commercial success is also very directly linked into the country's transport link. Personally, from where I come, I must admit it's quite shocking that for me to be able to travel from north to the south of the same country, I've got to go through a different country. It's no surprise that there is a brain drain. There is no surprise. But the thing is, again, it kind of comes back to that narrative of control as well. Because if we had those links, then obviously we're more likely to be prosperous, aren't we? But then, so if we take that away, we take your power away in a way. HS2 is the same. We're actually paying. I don't want to pay my hard-earned money towards something, towards nuclear weapons, that whilst 30% of the children in this country are going to bed hungry. Given a choice, I would always choose those 30% kids than a warfare, a weapon that could potentially kill millions of people and affect several generations after that. What are we paying for when kids in our own country are going hungry? But it comes down to that kind of coercive control as well, because when I actually reflect on it kind of from the outside in, it kind of looks like, you know, in bullying behavior, it's like that bully that steals your pencil and all your resources before an exam. Then when you can't write your exam, you basically like, ha, you failed, I know you were stupid. How are we supposed to write that exam without your resources? And that's what's happening. We are paying for water and electricity that we're producing here more than people who we're actually giving it to.
Yeah, I think there's really important points there. There's two things that stand out for me from what you just said, Nikki. The two things, I mean, the sense of what are the things that we feel passionately about, because passion comes through. as a genuine feeling. And I think the second thing that came through there as well is how we, and this is a real social media challenge, how do we reach out beyond our usual networks of communications and the way that the algorithms work, and that we have to find a way of going beyond our comfort zone. Mewn ffordd, Fflur, jyst i chi bach i ddod yn ôl i'r Gymraeg, so ni'n ymwybodol bod ni wedi siarad cryn dipyn o Saesneg yn anochel. Oeddech chi wedi cyfeirio gynt, yn parchu'r Gymraeg ydy sut dyn ni wedyn yn cympasu pawb yn y dull dyn ni'n cyfathrebu, ond tra'n cadw parch i'r iaith.
Sori, allwch chi ailadrodd dechrau'r cwestiwn nes i'n clywed?
Ie, jyst meddwl ydw i, dwi'n gweld ambell i'r sylwadau. Dyma ni yn gwneud yn gorau glas i weithio rhwng y ddwy iaith fan hyn, rhwng y Gymraeg a'r Saesneg. Ond mae'n heriol i ni wneud hynny yn naturiol. Sut da ni'n mynd i wneud yn siŵr bod ni'n, sut da ni'n ffindio ffwrdd estyn allan a cadw parch i'r iaith ar yr un pryd?
I'r iaith Gymraeg?
Ie.
Yn benodol. Wel, dwi'n meddwl bod eisiau bod ar hyder wrth gwrs i ddefnyddio'r Gymraeg. Mae'n anodd mewn fforwm fel hyn lle nad oes cyfieithu ar y pryd, achos ydych chi'n ddim eisiau bod yn eithrio rheini sydd ddim yn deall wrth gwrs, ond yn bendant mae'n efodd, mae eisiau meddwl am y Gymraeg fel yr peth unigryw na sydd ganddo ni yma yng Nghymru, na sydd ddim yn bodoli yng ngweddill y Deyrnas Unedig nac yng ngweddill y byd heblaw am ddarn o Batagonia. Ac felly mae'n rhywbeth i'w glodfori, ac mae'n ffyrdd o ddefnyddio'r Gymraeg a gwneud yn siŵr bod ni'n dechrau drwy ddefnyddio'r Gymraeg ar bob cyfle gallwn ni yn holl bwysig. Ond mae'n bwysig iawn hefyd bod ni yn cydnabod, tra bod ni'n mynd i fod yn cyd-drafod efo pob cymdeithas yng Nghymru a phob gwahanol genhedloedd a falle, bod ni'n parchu ieithoedd nhw hefyd. Achos mae'n dueddiad yn does i feddwl, gan bod ni'n siarad Cymraeg, bod ni felly yn ticio rhyw focs sydd yn meddwl bod ni'n deall beth ydy teimladau lleiafrifoedd ethnig ag ati at ieithoedd ag ati. Ond os dyn ni ddim yn dangos yr un parch i'r ieithoedd eraill sydd yma, yna dyn ni'n disgyn yr un trap a yn cymdogion ni'n dydyn.
Yeah, no, diolch yn fawr iawn. I mean, just a couple of questions to lead on from this, but I think that it's really important that we have this discussion about how do we intermesh the two languages, because the reality of using Welsh and English is that they are intermeshed. How do we make sure that there is a safe place for Welsh, but at the same time that we're bringing in other people as well? Now, of course, one of the risks of what we're doing, even in the way that I'm holding this conversation, is comparing ourselves with a monolingualism as a norm. And monolingualism is not a norm. But I think, again, as a nation, Welsh is so critical to part of our identity that it's a rolling conversation. It's quite interesting to see how Irish is discussed in Ireland. And I think actually we're in a stronger place. But a number of questions have come in on exactly this point, actually. There is an alignment in some people's minds on Welsh speaking, Plaid Cymru, independence. And to come back to the whole of Wales, looking at traditional Labour voters down in the post-industrial towns, what can we give to them as that will fire up hearts and minds in the sense of what independence will do for people in those sorts of communities? So people really quite different communities to those actually which Nikki and I now live in. Again, Fflur, perhaps I'm going to turn to you because you've got that interesting with your home background, where you're from in Meirionnydd, in Pendleton, and where you live now.
So, are you talking about how do we make it not about the Welsh language effectively?
How we roll out I think we know what excites us.
Yeah.
But we need to be able to convey that excitement to other people in terms of yes, this will make a difference to my life. Yes, this is important to my identity. And how do we do that, do you think, in say in the valleys with traditional Labour supporters, those people who are really, they're just tiptoeing on the edge of indie curious, and we want to show them the way through to get them to the other side?
That's a very difficult question. I think in terms of this perceived divide between the Welsh-speaking communities and those that are non-Welsh speaking, I think Welsh-speaking communities need to grow in their own self-confidence, so that it stops being, the issue that gets talked about every time in terms of the context of independence, because independence is about something that's far wider than just protecting the language, isn't it? And it's very important that we as Welsh speakers recognise that. And also, going back to the point I made earlier, doesn't matter where you grew up in Wales, what this is a national debate that is as equal importance to you if you live in the Rhondda, in Gwent, in Anglesey or in Gwynedd. I don't mind who you are, where you come from. This is something that we have to just inspire people's confidence on. And that can happen in both languages. It doesn't need to be and shouldn't be about the Welsh language. The Welsh language is something that needs protection and needs to be looked after and made, very much part of everyone's lives to the best of our ability. But the independence question and debate has to be about a wider set of issues than that, which means that then it becomes relevant for each person who lives here.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really powerful point. And I think it's a matter of respect too. If you like, a respect to a different language reflects through as respect to people who are different to myself or different to my immediate family. That is the sort of community in which we want to encourage, which we want to develop. Again, to come back as what we want out of independence, to make our communities a better place to live and to give people better life chances. Right, I'd like to move on now. I think one of the things that we've talked about regularly in relation to what independence means to us is it isn't just this sort of abstract, idealistic principal idea, but it is actually about being able to make things better for people. What is bad now, this is what we need to do that will make it critically better, that will really make a difference. How we will ease their pain, lighten their daily burdens. What we believe makes our communities in Wales something which is so precious. Partly the worldview and the idea of supporting people in need, supporting people to be a sense of value of happiness, slightly different approach to values. And these are not a political party point of view in and of themselves. This is sort of a worldview and a worldview of values. But I mean, the simple reality of this is if you're looking for a vehicle to get us to that point of independence, well, you've got vehicles in certain political parties that are just, they're on autonomous self-drive, if you like, autopilot, to take us straight to the border and over. That's what they do. If you're looking for the vehicle that will take you up and down and everywhere in Wales, that political vehicle is Plaid Cymru, which means that we need to have the power to bring the stages that the Independence Commission has laid us out as a roadmap to bring those stages along the way. So for Plaid Cymru to be able to convey this message on the doorstep, what should we be doing to even to people, just if you want this is what we need to do for now, then we can work with other parties. What is the winning message, do you think? I mean, Nikki, when you're talking to people over social media, what do you think is the critical thing that Plaid needs to do?
Liz, I think any party, irrespective of Plaid, Labour, whoever, nothing will work. And this independence movement will not go forward till the time people actually believe that people representing them have got their backs. Empathy needs to be conveyed. People need to know that when you actually say that you understand what their lived condition, what their lived reality is, that you actually understand. Because people who've I'm not saying everyone has to be poor to understand poverty, but that's where empathy comes in. You don't have to be poor to understand poverty. You just need to go back into that time in your life when you felt that level of despair, that someone who can't, feed their kids 3 square meals a day feels. And I think that's the thing. It's that link that people need to connect with, because politicians, at the end of the day, are people who are one of us and who are just representing our views. At the moment, what we're noticing in governments is that everyone's kind of trying to one-up each other. As completely impartial person, I'm as just a citizen, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less who brings the prosperity. But I know for a fact, from what I've seen, is Plaid actually offers that, but the reach, and I think, and that's what the difference is the reach of people actually understanding and knowing that I can put my faith in Plaid and that will get me somewhere. And I think empathy is, for me, is the answer. I need someone to really understand what my daily struggles are before I can them.
Yeah, there's a couple of good points coming up here from comments as well. One here, Dan Will Jam, I have always voted Labour and have never really been interested in Welsh independence, but I've been looking into it a lot lately, and I'm on board. I'm also done with Labour now, and I find myself here. So yeah, I think it is refreshing that people are prepared to look at a new idea and not just go with the same thing that, say, their families have always done, but actually to be thinking and working out what this could mean for them. There's another good point here, I think. I mean, this is by Hugh Williams. Just byddwch yn honest, just be honest. There's so much negativity around the two main parties at the moment. A mae 'na ddrws agored I blaid sydd ddim yn mynd I drio dwylla bobl, daliwch ati. So that there is, an open door for a party that does its best not to be deceitful. I think that would be true for politicians. I think one of the great things for politicians actually is to be able to say that they've made a mistake, to be honest. The noble art of losing face. But again, think about, we're all of us politicians here. I'm lucky enough to be, or unlucky, depends on how you look at it, to be able to do it full time. But those of us who are passionate about what is best for our communities, what is best for our families, what is best for our neighbours, and this idea that things can get better, is to channel that passion. And I think that it must have been really interesting, Fflur, to work on the Independence Commission, because that was a chance to take passion and put it into what can be the cold words of law, but without it being properly codified, for a boring cold word, it doesn't work, does it? It must have been really exciting to have been on that first stage. What do you hope for as the next stage now? Just really, how do you see it personally developing from this? Not what's officially in the book, but how would you like to see this going ahead?
I think I'd like to see, post the Assembly elections in 2021, that a real change happens. I think the pandemic and its effects has and continues to have such far-reaching effects on every aspect of our lives, causing huge societal moves and impacts on the economy. And there are ideas in the report about how we should be moving forward the discussion about independence and so forth. And I just hope that whoever's in government, or whether there's coalitions or whatever there is, that there will be an opportunity to really explore and to take on board and to adopt some of the recommendations in that report, because I think that then will signify the beginning of a proper journey towards independence. So that's what I would like to see happen. And obviously that's not going to happen without all the engagement and the communication that we've discussed, and the growing in trust and confidence, and that big word that Nikki mentioned, empathy, and people feeling that, the political parties have their back, has to come into play in a better way than it has been with as you say, apologies, and also people resigning when they've done things wrong.
people being held to account. What you do in public life affects what other people do, and it's not a game, and you can't just mold it into the shape that you like, and that there are such things as principles. Nikki, with your with your children as well, you're thinking, where would you like things to be for them in 20 years' time?
In the easiest possible way. I don't want anyone telling my child that you're too stupid, you're from a stupid country, you're worthless. Not going to happen. My child is going to grow up, both my kids are going to grow up knowing that they have so much to offer, as does their country, because they do. We've got so much to offer. There's whole economies based just in agriculture. And Wales has so much to offer. We've just got so much untapped potential. And I think one of the things I kind of wanted to mention before was, whoever the leader is, I don't know what the election results would be, whoever the leader is, when we have the First Minister for Wales, I don't want to see a person who's representing their party. I want to see a person who is human and who is representing each and every person that lives in Wales, who calls Wales their home. And that's the end of it. Whoever that may be, that's what I need. And at the moment, all I see is people just fighting for the benefit of their party. Who's going to look after the people?
Yeah, we're a generation that's inherited a certain sort of politics that is desperately inadequate for the challenges that we now face. And just occasionally, like from New Zealand, we see leaders who work in a different way. And that need, I think the need to look beyond the shores of the United Kingdom for inspiration is something that we all of us have a duty to do that. And I hope that with implied that we do our best, but we've got to work with other people on this as well. But we mustn't let our horizons be bounded and our aspirations be bounded by what the UK tells us and what the British state tells us we should expect. We should expect far more. Right, we're just beginning to come to the end of this session. I'm really grateful. There's been absolutely loads of comments. Mae'n ddrwg gen I mod I ddim wedi gallu tynnu sylw atyn nhw gyd, a bod yn honest, mod i'n gallu gweld nhw, maen nhw'n dod mor sydyn, fedra I ddim dal I fyny, mae'n ddrwg gen I, mae di bod yn wych I gweld y fath ymateb. It's been a really, really, really good interaction. Just so sort of apologise that I couldn't draw attention to everybody's comments. But it's great that there's been such a reaction, such interaction. Right, I want to close now and imagining this scenario. We're 100 years from now, we're 100 years into Welsh independence. So Wales is celebrating a centenary of independence. We've had, in good time, we've thought about this. We've put a time capsule to one side. We've put precious things in the time capsule that encapsulate what independence, what our aspirations and our hopes are. Fflur, what have you put in the time capsule?
Wel, yn amlwg, Liz, fy rhaid roed copi o'r adroddiad cyrchu annibyniaeth I Gymru, a rhag ofni iddo fynd yn angof. A hefyd byddwn ni yn bendant yn dymuno gweld dau glasur Cymraeg, Cerddi'r Cywilydd, Gerall Lloyd Owen yno, efo'i glasuron sydd yn atgoffa ni o'r lle den ni wedi dod, a hefyd llyfr Manon Steffan Ross, llyfr Glas Nebo, I atgoffa ni be den ni'n gallu wneud pan den ni roed yn meddwl ar y gwaith, a sut den ni'n gallu dod rownd pethau ofnadwy o frawychus fel mae hi'n disgrifio yn y llyfr.
Gwyr, da iawn, da iawn. And Nikki, what would you like to put in the time capsule?
My Dylan the Dragon. When I first moved to the country, this was the first thing I bought. And the reason for that was when I saw the Welsh flag, my immediate thought was, my gosh, this must be a badass country that's got a dragon on their flag. And you know what? For me, irrespective of any doubts people have about Wales, that will never change. And I want my kids to believe that they've got it. That's the world's
coolest flag. And I have a couple of books on independence, but who I brought with me this is my symbol for the time capsule, because he's cuddly, he's cute, he's tenacious, doesn't mind that he's got little tiny legs. He doesn't even know he's got little tiny legs. A corgidia. Ci go iawn Ci Cymru. Felly, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Thank you, everybody. I hope it's been a useful evening. I've really enjoyed it. We'll have to carry the conversation on. Iawn, trewn.
Ciao.
Diolch.
Diolch.